Hey, everybody. Today we're talking to my friend Scott. Scott is a front end developer. And so he would be the one who would be making your designs in code if you guys work together. So we're going to be talking about how you can make designs that engineers can actually build and how you can collaborate with engineers better. So, Scott, thank you for being on today. Do you want to add anything more to that introduction?
Of course. No, I thought that was good. I have been a front-end engineer in Silicon Valley for about the last decade, companies like GitLab, Autodesk, and have worked with a ton of designers in open source and for-profit companies. So I'm really glad that we get to talk about this today because it's something that no one really talks about.
Yeah, definitely. And Scott has a lot of good things to say about this topic. We've had multiple conversations about this kind of thing before. So glad we get to record it, and hopefully others can benefit from it. So I have a few different questions ready to go. So I'll just get into it now.
Cool.
We'll kind of do a Q&A and maybe kind of deviate from there if we feel like it's necessary. So the first question that I had is, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that designers make when they're making production-ready designs?
That's a 20-minute question. I have a 20-minute response for that question. So we might need to dig deeper into that. I think even engineers have this problem too. And it's like, we do highly specialized things for businesses and we lose the for business aspect of it. So I think knowing why you're designing something is really important. You might not have a researcher on your team, and we can talk about that. But being able to clearly articulate, like I can back my decision up with data, because a designer might say, this looks really good and this is the functionality I want, but maybe they don't need anything. Maybe the customer doesn't want this. So now you've spent time, you've talked to stakeholders, and then you pass it to engineers, and then they build it, and then no one uses it, which is a huge cost. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, is not being empathetic with your user. So being really good at interviews, being really good at understanding who you're building this for is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes. That's something I wanted to touch on. And like, I had to do interviews for a product I was building as an engineer, and that helped me build it better. So if you're an engineer or designer, knowing the pain, really digging into that. And we can talk about a little bit more. And then the second thing I wanted to touch on is, and this goes to the business, is like cost benefit analysis of this design, right? You might think that there's like a really cool interaction, but that interaction might take me 3 weeks to build. And it's like, does that really bring value? So how can we get the design to be useful and making the business money and users happy? And then can we add on top of it? So that I have 3 parts of my answer. One more part is understanding the important edge cases for a list, for example. So let's say you just have a list. How many records could be in the list? Maybe 1,000, maybe 100, maybe 10,000. So do we need to paginate? We need to think about performance. What happens on load? What's the user experience? How do you design for that? What happens if the page doesn't load properly? What happens if a portion of the page, like really getting into every phase of being a user, not just here's a design static, because that costs you so much time, which is time is money. So that was a lot, but those are the things that I would look out for.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And to add on to that, I know from like a designer's perspective, it can be so easy to just get caught up in like making a cool design without doing that more in-depth thought about like the why and like the edge cases, which I guess some would consider like the more boring thing. So yeah, really, really important not to do that kind of thing.
Totally. I mean, like look at Craigslist is a great example. It's like aesthetically ugly, but it's functional. Um,
Mhm.
and the world of design and front end goes so deep. Like we can talk about color theory, we can talk about accessibility, we can talk about performance. So
Mhm.
just making designs just scratches the layer of something that you can spend your life mastering and learning about. And it just, once you understand that, it's like, okay, what's the most valuable thing for this business? Are you not
Mhm.
getting business because the website isn't accessible? So do we have to design for that? Are most of our users colorblind? Like we just covered 10 topics that take a lot of time to really think through. Trello is a really good example of that. And they realized that like the color patterns of the columns were really hard for people that were colorblind to read. So they have a colorblind mode that changes colors into patterns. So now they open up a whole nother user segment. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I know there's a lot of junior designers that watch this channel who eventually want to be senior designers. Um, I would actually say that like what you were mentioning would be like the big thing that would separate a junior designer from a senior designer
Totally.
is to think through all those things. So super important for your growth as a
Yeah.
designer to rise through the ranks.
And if you ever like, it gets overwhelming. Like, oh my God, someone might be listening to this and say, I need to go learn all these things I've never heard of, and I'm just trying to get a job. And it's overwhelming. And the one thing you can do that's like an action item you can take away is whoever you're working with as an engineer, ask them, how was the design? Can I do anything to improve? What made this difficult? What assumptions did you have to make? If you just ask those questions, you're going to learn 95% of this without having to go study on your own.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's actually like super related to the next question that I had. I was going to ask you, how would you recommend that a designer learn how to make designs that can realistically be built by a developer? So I guess what you just mentioned would be one of those things. But do you have anything else to add on to that?
Are we assuming that they're not working in a company right now, or they kind of already have a job? What would be the context?
Um, let's see. I know that there's a lot of people that watch this channel that are currently looking for a job that haven't had their first like full-time role yet. So I think first we should probably talk to that sort of scenario so that people are more ready when they eventually do get a job.
I don't um I don't like the answer I'm going to give because it takes a lot of effort, but I think it's necessary to say,
Mhm.
um, if I was a designer, it's like if I was it's the same answer if I was an engineer, right? Contribute to open source. It's a little bit harder for design, but I would maybe find a problem that I'm trying to solve that I'm super passionate about. Um, like you helped me with designs in the past for Artist Mat, which was a problem we wanted to solve. So I would make a design solving that problem. And honestly, like maybe hire some developers on Upwork or get it built in some way and be like a business owner, like have that mindset and
Mhm.
then see the problems that come up. Like there, for not that much money, you can get someone on Upwork to build your website in whatever they want. So get that feedback, be like, oh, I should have said this. I should have said this. They gave me this feedback. You're getting experience without experience, and sometimes you just have to pay a little bit of money to do that. It's another thing I don't know if anyone talks about, but you're doing the job at that point, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such a good idea. And if a designer did want to take those steps to do exactly that, and they were to do a job interview and talked about how they actually got their designs built and they hired a developer, like they could stand out massively if they
Yeah,
do.
it
Like,
doesn't take much to be in the top 1% of
yeah.
the interviews. It's a common problem that you see with people say web development is dead, and boot camp grads can't get a job, and it's like you do three things and you stand out, and it's like it's
Hmm.
pretty easy, right? You just have to go the extra mile.
Right. Yeah. I think that's such a good point. Um, and yeah, it is a little bit harder now than it was in the past to get a
Mhm.
job. So doing things like that now are almost like a prerequisite requirement.
Exactly. It's not optional anymore. It's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Well, great answer there. Um, and for the next question that I had, I'm wondering, is there anything a designer can design that is always going to be impossible to or close to impossible to build in code?
It's a good question. Short answer is no, because with unlimited time, you can build anything. It would just become the impossibilities, the constraints. Like the designer isn't the owner of the feature or of the business. So whoever is right product, probably in this case, let's say you work at a company, it's like a product manager. That person is going to tell you your designs need to be done in a week. Okay, you get them done, and then they show it to the developers, and the developers give an estimate and say, okay, we have sprints, which is just like chunks of time that we commit to work in. Um, our sprints are 2 weeks. We need to get this done in one sprint or two sprints. The impossibility would just become the constraint of time of the product, and then the usefulness um, to the user. And this is all very business kind of centric, which is the goal of the people watching this channel, is getting a job and making
Mhm.
money. But they might design some, like if we're just talking about passion projects, they might design something in 3D that I don't have 3D experience, but with unlimited time, I'll be able to figure it out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, that does. So basically, there's nothing that's like impossible to build, whether it's like some super complex animation that's just like so unnecessary, but it really comes down to like, why would you ever like need to
Yeah,
build?
exactly. And time. Yeah, 100%.
Uh,
Because I mean, those types of things, it's like that's how you challenge progress. It's like someone spent a year doing this one animation and then they documented it, and now people can do it in 30 seconds. So
mm,
there's value in that.
mhm.
And maybe someone created a new design like 90s websites versus, and then you had like Ajax, which is like asynchronous fetching of data. Right before you'd submit a form and the page would refresh. Now you don't need the page to refresh. You can just go get data in the background and do um, optimized updates for users. Right, like you click a button that hasn't even been done on the server yet, but I'm just showing the user it has, and if it fails, then I'll show a message. So it's like
Mm,
those are things that designers are like, we need this, and developers are like, let's figure it out. So there is value in that. It just depends on the context.
I see. I see. So basically, a designer should take what they should take away from this is, even though anything is possible, they should still think with constraints in mind
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
when they're designing.
Yep. Because you will never, um, if a developer has never done something before, then their estimates are garbage. They don't know how to do it. Like, just how can you estimate something you've never done?
Hmm.
So, and if there's other priorities. But yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap it up.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that's some really good advice there. So the next thing that I'm wondering is, how often do you think designers and developers should communicate? And at what stage of the designer's design process should they start talking to engineers?
It's a really good question. I think you should have an open door, like open communication, and be able, the designers in like the design world, so they might just make assumptions, and then when a developer sees it, they might have questions. So you should have like an open door policy both ways. Um, because I might bring up performance concerns, I might bring up accessibility concerns, I might bring up blah blah blah, whatever. So you should communicate as often as possible. That doesn't mean you need to get on a meeting. It just means you need to have good asynchronous communication skills like Slack,
Hmm.
or it's actually something I want to mention with you as a thing to level you up. I'm going to write this down for later, is getting them into GitHub. And then at what stage should they be talking with the developers? Anytime there's confidence that there's a business need for the thing. Because what you can do that, like, you could definitely like overshare and say like, the business has this idea, here are some mocks, start thinking about it. It's kind of a waste of time if you're never going to build it. But if it's 90% shot that this is going to be coming down the pipeline, I think it's good to have like a 1 hour meeting with the engineering team, front end engineers, back end engineers, and product, and just say, this is what's coming up in the next month. Please start thinking about it, and constraints that you see on my designs that we might need to rework, because you might give them feedback on a part of the design and user interaction that the users really want, but are impossible and time constraints for you. So as early as possible with confidence is kind of what I would say.
I see. Yeah, and I think everyone's job becomes easier once you start talking about those things earlier. Because I mean, as a designer, you don't want to have these like high fidelity mock-ups all ready to go, all the interactions all thought out and everything. The engineer tells you can't do something, and then you have to just go redo all of your work. Yep. So yeah, definitely want to catch those things early on.
And that's at GitLab, that was one of their core values, is like iterate, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but just like start, like do it's called like not MVP, but MVC, minimum viable like customer value, or minimum viable contribution. So it's like, what can I release to a customer as fast as possible that has the most impact, right? So that design might be garbage, but if a customer is using it and wants it, and that's the difference between them staying on or not, you got to get it out the door. So yeah, your point of like, don't do high fidelity, like get it in front of someone and get people to say, yeah, I can work with this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really like that whole philosophy that GitLab has. I think that's great. So I'll move on to the last question that I had now. Can you tell us about a great experience you've had working with a designer and why you thought that experience was good?
Yeah. This is kind of it's like the interview question you get at jobs. That's like, tell me a time you disagreed with your manager and how you resolved it. Like, they just want to understand your conflict resolution approach. And I kind of think it's the same thing. Like, I've had designers that just really think through the problem and know they have an answer to everything. So they know the user wants it. The designs are well thought out on edge cases and easy for me to implement. And then on top of that, they have an open door policy where I can get feedback immediately. That's like, generally speaking, that's when it's the most enjoyable. That's not always the case, but what makes it enjoyable is that I can go to a designer and say, these are my concerns, and that they can like listen to them and be like, oh, okay, I didn't understand that. Like, can we talk more through this so that I understand for next time? Right? You're always going to miss something. It's just, how do you resolve that? Because if you think about what I just said, how many stages have potential for error? Not validating that the feature is something business wants, handing off the designs, pixels aren't, pixels are all over the place. I have to keep asking questions. Nothing's well thought through. So just it's hard to make my job easier if you don't know my job. So like shadowing with an engineer, right? Like, I want to watch you build my design. What problems do you have? That's like that's the most enjoyable thing.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. So it really comes down to like, are their design files organized and thought through, and is their communication after they hand it over to you on point?
Yep, exactly.
All right.
And it's like, they're going to say, no, we have to do this. And I'm going to be like, okay, well, this is what it's going to cost.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Something, was that your last question?
Yeah, that was the last question.
I wanted to bring up two things that I think another thing that designers, if they implement, will just be beyond their competition in getting jobs and make their career so much more enjoyable. One of them is basic understanding of Git and GitHub. I'm less concerned about Git. It's just like, action item, go get a GitHub account and just explore, see what it's like. Because in an organization with Slack, email, all these other tools, I don't want to talk to a designer in 3 different places and not have documentation.
Mm-hmm.
If I if I push a feature up to GitHub and I have a developer review it, they look at the designs and say, that looks good to me, but they don't have the same level of detail. So at GitLab, it was mandatory that you were able to use GitHub, and all of your comments and feedback were in GitHub. So you'd have a designer review your pull request.
Mm-hmm.
There are tools that you can use to make your life easier, like it'll deploy a separate app for you to go review.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to have that final say of like, oh, I missed this. Can we make a follow-up for that? This looks really good. I don't really like the spacing here. In one place,
Mm-hmm.
you're worth your weight in gold. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I had 2 designers, equal experience, and I owned a company and one of them could interact with my developers on GitHub and they understood the value of reviewing their work before customers saw it, you're hired. Like,
Yeah.
that is my one thing that if that's what you said in an interview, I'm like, I don't care about anything else. So very important. No one talks about that because designers are usually not technical and organizations don't really push for this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the companies I was working at, none of the designers were in GitHub, and I asked for them to be in GitHub, and it's night and day experience wise.
Wow.
Collaboration. So that's one. And then the next one is understanding, like, I'm not sure how much there's training in scalable layouts, like designing for margins, like equal margins, and then it scales down and like how that scales up. Because if we have all these different things all over the place, it makes our jobs really hard. So doing a little bit of research into like CSS, I have some courses that I can help you link, but it's like, this is scalable CSS. This is how well-written CSS looks like.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be good at it, but it's like, okay, cool. I see the pain. I'll design around that. I think is really big as well.
I see. So how deep do you think they would need to get into CSS to like have that understanding of it? Like maybe just one course and then they kind of have the gist of it?
Yeah, I think so. Because like, I think when you can understand the tools that you're using, so that the developers are using, so CSS is like cascading style sheets.
Mm-hmm.
So how, just understanding how it works, you could take, there's this course, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the best CSS course I've ever taken. And it's like, these are kind of gotchas. And this is how CSS works. It makes you designing easier and less feedback, because then you're like, oh, this is going to be a problem for the developer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or, oh, I know that's possible for sure. Like, you just have the confidence. It's not the thing preventing you from getting a job, but I think it's something that will help you sharpen your sword later on, that very good designers I've worked with have done. But again, I want to bring up things that no one's talking about that people should be doing.
Right. And then it's like we were talking about earlier. It's like, since the job market is a little bit harder, it's completely worth doing things like this to stand out now.
Exactly.
So Yeah, I think that's some really valuable advice. So, yeah, I think the designers watching this, I'm sure got a lot of value from hearing you talk about this kind of stuff. So, thank you very much
Of course.
for my questions. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, that's it. I'll link some of the resources we talked about below, so that they can get started. And I'll link my channel, and if they have questions, they can message us. But please leave a comment if this was valuable to you, if you have any questions, and we can make more content for you to help out with your job search.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you again. And thank you so much to everyone for watching. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. I hope that information was helpful. Before you go, I just wanted to let you know that I am now offering one-on-one design coaching. For this coaching, I'm going to be focusing on teaching you UI and visual design because I find that this is one of the things that beginner designers struggle with the most and is the biggest thing preventing them from getting freelance clients or jobs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with you to improve your existing designs and also teach you principles about UI and visual design that you can use going forward to always have work that looks incredible and stands out and makes it so that you can get as many clients or job offers as you want. So if that sounds good, please email me at kyletorresdesign@gmail.com. I'll also post that email down in the description. So thank you for watching.